Hey church, it is so good to be with you once again, and we're going to be continuing in our series called Sunday School. That's right, we're taking a look at typical Sunday School messages. We're bringing them to life for you in this series. We have one more week to go with this. We're going to conclude next week, but today it's all about David and Goliath. That's right, David and Goliath. Hey, it's going to be a good one. Hey, a long time ago in 1952, a woman named Florence Chadwick attempted the longest swim ever. It was going to be 26 miles. It was going to go from Catalina Island to the coast of California. She started off in the morning and swimming away. The problem was there was dense fog. It was very difficult to see. She kept trudging along. But unfortunately, 300 yards from her final destination, they pulled her out of the water. She was 300 yards from finishing the swim. And the statement that she made was, all she could see was hopelessness. That's right, all she could see was hopelessness. She couldn't see the end. And this is what happens to so many of us. We get right to where we can see victory. We get right to where we can start to experience it, and we give up. I watch people do this all the time with their Christian lives. They're believing for something. They're praying for something. And they quit just before that victory or that breakthrough. And that obstacle becomes an opportunity for greatness. And they miss it. I don't want that to be you. And so here we are with David and Goliath. And here it is. Here's the big idea. Here's the big idea for you today. This is it. Every one of us can defeat our giants by activating courageous faith. That's right, by activating courageous faith in these three ways. Number one, we have to identify the problem. Number two, engage the problem. And number three, we need to realize that we can overcome with the power of God. So, just like every Sunday school message, we have a memory verse. Here's yours. Here it is, right here. This is the Lord's battle. 1 Samuel 17:47. This is the Lord's battle. Hey, what would it take and what does it look like for each and every one of us to live with victory? How can we truly look at the obstacles in our life and see them as opportunities for faith to grow? That's what we're going to explore today. So here it is. It's all about David. And David, central character in the Old Testament. Here he was anointed to be king at a very young age as a teenager, but that didn't come true yet. And so here's David, the youngest of a whole bunch of boys here. And so David, three older brothers fighting in the army for the Israelite army. Three oldest brothers are there. He's at home. Now, typically in Old Testament biblical times, when armies would face off, very typical, like one person from each army would face off, winner take all. And so the Philistine army, the Goliath, he was a huge giant of a man. That's right. He was well over 9 feet tall. He was trained to fight from a young age. His spear, everything about him. His spearhead weighed 15 pounds. His breastplate alone was 125 pounds. So this is a really big dude, and he's taunting. He's like taunting the Israelite army, God's people, his army, like, hey, what do you got here? And Saul was terrified here. 1 Samuel 17:11, when Saul and the Israelites heard Goliath taunting them, they were terrified and deeply shaken. Saul, God's man, God's leader, one of the tallest men around, and he didn't have faith in God. So here we're going to pick up the story here in verse 16. 1 Samuel 17, verse 16. For 40 days, let me pause there, 40 typically in the Bible is marked for testing. There's always a time of testing in what is going to happen with that test before we get victory. And so for 40 days, every morning and evening, the Philistine champion strutted in front of the Israelite army. And one day, Jesse said to David, hey man, take this basket of roasted grain, these 10 loaves of bread, and carry them quickly to your brothers. And give these 10 cuts of cheese to their captains. And see how they're getting along and bring back word to me. So here's David. He's at home. He's tending the sheep. His dad gives him an assignment to take the grain and the bread and the cheese to his brothers and the captains of the army. So what we see David here, he's at home minding his own business. And two things stand out to me right here. Number one is he was under authority of his dad. When his dad gave him an assignment to do, he obeyed. So if we want to set ourselves up to defeat the giants in our lives, and we all have giants in our lives, what we need to do is stay under authority and stay in obedience, because that is going to lead us into a place where God can bring a victory in our lives. And that's it. So David, the cheese boy. That's right. Now, listen, if you're at home watching here, I want you to run out. I want you to run to the kitchen, turn up the volume, run to the kitchen, get some cheese, because it's snack time. That's right. Every Sunday school message has to have a snack time. This is it. David the cheese boy. He's delivering cheese. That's what it is. But this is how God set him up for success right here. So this is how he meets Goliath, just by simple acts of obedience. God's putting him in a place. And you may be confused about what God's doing in your life right now. You may be, hey, I'm not real sure. Stay under authority. Stay obedient. God's going to set you up for success. Definitely. So here it is. Every one of us can defeat the giants in our life. We all have giants by activating courageous faith. And courageous faith will identify the real problem. That's right. See, if we're going to have faith, we need to identify the real problem. And that's right. So here we go. In verse 20, David left the sheep with another shepherd and set out early the next morning with the gifts as Jesse directed him. He arrived in the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving for the battlefield with their shouts and cries. And so soon the Israelite and the Philistine forces stood facing each other, army to army. Verse 22, David left his things with the keeper of supplies and hurried to the ranks to greet his brothers. As he was talking with his brothers, he's like getting the report for his dad. He says, hey, what's going on here? Okay, he can hear something. And he can hear this giant Goliath taunting them. Verse 24, as soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. Have you seen the giant? The men asked. He comes out every day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him. He will pay that man one of his daughters for a wife, and the man's entire family will be exempted from paying taxes. What a deal. Come on, check this out. Like, you get a cash reward, you get to marry one of the king's daughters, and you don't have to pay taxes for life. Talk about a great deal here. And so that's what's offered for anybody who can take him on. So David asked the soldiers, what will the men get? And they explained this to him. See, there's two responses to Goliath right here. The Israelite army, they were terrified. They had fear. They didn't know what to do. They were like, oh my goodness. They were looking in the natural. David, on the other hand, he's like, hey, what do you get to take on? What do you get here? Because this giant Goliath, the Philistines, they're mocking God. They're defying God. See, to identify the real problem was to realize here that the problem was this giant was defying God. The soldiers were taking it personal. It's me against you. David knew that something bigger was at stake. That this is it here. See, we have to choose how we're going to respond to the taunting giants in our life. And every one of us has something taunting in our lives. You'll never succeed. You'll never have joy. You'll never live without anxiety or depression. You'll never be able to be free from maybe that sin that's taunting you. See, listen, these are some of the ones that have been in my life. There's giants taunting me and saying, you'll never amount to anything. You'll never succeed. You'll never be free here. And see, See, this is what the taunts of the giant sound like. But we have to identify the problem. The problem is they're not defying me, they're defying my God. That's the point. That's what we're seeing here. And that's why this memory verse, this is the Lord's battle. This isn't just my battle. This isn't my thing. This is God's here. See, so if we're going to see the real problem, we have to see through eyes of faith and see the real deal that's going on here. This is why this is so important. We have to look with God's eyesight, not our eyesight here. See, we're either going to be giant focused or God focused. David had an image of God, and his God was bigger than his obstacle, bigger than the giant here. This is the problem here. See, if we tolerate giants, we deserve what we tolerate. And we deserve the taunting because we're not identifying this is an assault against God, not me. Listen, it's not my worth that's at stake, it's my growth that's at stake. My worth has already been established. I'm a child of God. I belong to God. He's everything to me. But what I need to realize in this moment here is that they're taunting God here. So we have to settle in our hearts. I'm going to identify the problem. This is the Lord's battle. This isn't my battle. And I'm going to walk by faith, not by sight. My perspective is everything. Perspective is everything. You see, every one of us can defeat the giants in our life by activating courageous faith in these three areas. Number one, just covered, we have to identify the problem. This giant is defying God. And number two, we have to be willing to engage the problem. We have to be willing to engage the problem. Do you know one of the biggest differences between winning and losing, between being victorious or being defeated? It's the direction that we go. That's right, when we're moving forward, we have a chance to win. See, we will either engage the enemy, engage the giant, be forceful to it, or we'll run the other direction. Something that I learned in tennis regularly. And I wish I could say I was more successful in this. But when I'm moving forward, I play much better. When I'm moving backwards, I'm being very defensive. And I usually don't hit very well at all. And one of the things I've been learning over and over is that when I'm moving forward towards the net, towards my opponent, I hit better. I respond better. I can play better. But when I'm moving backwards, I very rarely can hit a good shot, if even getting the ball over the net. The same thing is true with God. I have to be willing to move in the right direction. That's got to be willing to move in the right direction here. So, we have to be willing to continue to move in the right direction. So here we go. In verse 32 here, verse 32. Don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I will go and fight him. Don't be ridiculous. Now, isn't this a word of encouragement? Don't be ridiculous, Saul. Saul replied, there's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's a man of war since his youth. I mean, Goliath's been fighting since his youth, and you're just a boy. How are you going to take on this giant? Now, isn't this a word of encouragement right here? Oh, my goodness. See, Saul is telling him, you don't add up. You don't have what it takes. You'll never make it. This is what plagued me most of my life. People telling me I'll never succeed. People telling me you'll never accomplish. You'll never do anything worthwhile. And I've had to fight this with courageous faith in my life, not just accept that as the norm. I mean, David could have said, well, Saul's in charge. He knows I don't have what it takes. I'm just going to pack up. I'm just going to go home, give the report to my dad. Come on. This is what he could have done. But listen, even Goliath started as a youth, and David is saying, yes, I'm young, most likely a teenager at this point, but I'm going to do something about this. So David persisted, verse 34. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb. from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and I club it to death. Verse 36, I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do this to this pagan Philistine too. For he has defiled the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. You see, Saul finally consented. All right then, go ahead, and may the Lord be with you. See, I'm going to tell you where the battle was won. The battle was won in David's life when he was all alone. That's right, he was tending sheep under authority in obedience. Keep hold of that here. As a young boy, he defended those sheep. He defended and he warded off the lion. In illustration of what the lion could represent is pride. And the bear is power. And if we are going to fend off and be victorious and defeat the giants in our life, we have to deal with the internal pride and the internal desire for power in our lives. Because if we do not conquer them, they will conquer us. And we conquer them in our private time. We conquer them when there's nobody else watching. We conquer these things and we're prepared for battle and victory when we're all alone here. That's where the battle is won. So we get confidence and we have hope for tomorrow when we have faith in our today. Faith that God has put me in this place. See, when nobody's looking, that's when the battle is won here. That's when it's won. So, picking up the story here, in verse 38, Saul gave David his own armor, and he started trying to put it on him. And David literally protested and said, I can't fight with this. I can't fight with your armor. I know how to defend off and I protect sheep, God's people, as an illustration. I know how to do this. I know how to do this I did it in private, the lion and the bear. I can do it this way here. So David went and he picked up 5 smooth stones from the stream and he put them in his shepherd's bag. And then, armed only with his shepherd's staff and a sling, he started across the valley to the Philistine. Can you imagine everybody looking at him thinking, what's this boy doing? What's this boy doing? Just going up to fight guys with nothing but a staff and a couple stones in his bag and a slingshot. What on earth could he be doing here? And let me tell you, he picked up 5 stones. And let me tell you the significance of those 5 stones. Why did he pick up 5 stones? He picked up 5 stones. That's the significance of 5 stones. I've heard so many messages from people about the significance and they pull all this stuff in about 5. I'm going to tell you, when I read this text, he picked up 5 because that's how many he picked up. He picked up 5 and put them in his bag. Listen here. But this is what he did. He went to engage the opposition. He went to engage the giant. And one of the things, if we're going to have victory in our lives, if Jesus' church is going to have victory against the pagan culture that we are a part of right now, it's going to be because we go forward and engage the culture, not sit terrified back and wait for something to happen here. And Goliath keeps teasing, he's taunting, he's sneering, and he's jeering, and he's doing all these things. And just what the world's doing to us, stay inside your 4 walls. Don't speak out. Don't say anything. You just live your little Christian life to yourself. But no, we have to be willing to engage. We have to be willing to step out in courageous faith to defeat these giants here. Verse 41, very significantly, Goliath walked out toward David with his shield bearer ahead of him. And he was sneering in contempt of this ruddy-faced boy. This ruddy-faced, this red-faced, that's what that means. This little red-faced boy. You know, this is interesting. Goliath got cocky. Rather than standing behind the shield, he came out from behind it. This is interesting. If we wait, the enemy will reveal himself and show his vulnerability. Because the enemy's cocky, arrogant, prideful. And the enemy will come out and reveal himself. And then we can take it down. We can take the enemy down here. And the enemy's, again, taunting. Am I a dog that you come to me with a stick? And come over here, and I'm going to give your flesh to the birds and wild animals. He showed himself. But David replied in verse 45, you come to me with a sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of the heavens' armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you defiled. Today the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head, and then I will give the dead bodies of your men to the birds and the wild animals. Verse 47. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people, but not with a sword or spear. This is the Lord's battle. There's our memory verse. This is the Lord's battle, and I'm going to engage not based on who I am, but based on who my God is, and he will give it to us. And Goliath moved closer to attack. Again, Goliath was vulnerable, not hidden behind the shield here, and David quickly ran out to meet him. Quickly, David goes to engage. And I'm telling you, if we will go in the right direction, there's victory for you. There's victory for me in the Spirit of God. Because if we're going to be victorious over the giant, and we're going to engage the giant, and we're going to be victorious and activate courageous faith, we got to identify the problem. They're defying God. And then we got to be willing to engage the problem and run quickly here. Today, verse 46, the Lord will conquer you, and I will kill you and cut off your head. Do you hear the confidence here? Now, this is what they should teach in children's ministry, in Sunday school. When David, listen, he didn't just hit him with a rock on the forehead. Listen, he went and he cut off his head. This is significant. We're going to get to this here. This is where it gets good here. See, what issues are taunting you? The ones the mental things that you can't, you won't, you'll never, and you shouldn't. No, I want to speak to you today that you can. You can accomplish through God. In God, there's victory. In God, we can be victorious. I'm telling you here, because we can actively, listen, we can defeat our giants by activating courageous faith, identifying the problem, engaging the problem. But here it is also overcoming our problems by the power of God. It's God's power. And so as David slung that stone at the giant, hit him in the forehead, knocked him over, he cut off his head, and they pursued him here because God will get the victory through us, his church, his sons. But it's a victory that we get together. You see, David's victory was a victory for everybody. And that's the joy of being a part of a church, that one person's victory is everybody's victory. That's the joy of being one church in 4 locations, that when one campus succeeds, we all succeed. That's the joy of being a part of a church that's a part of a great city in Pittsburgh, that when one church is succeeding, we're all succeeding. It's one victory leads to all the others, because it's not by might nor power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord. Listen, there's hopeless situations that we're facing, but we can get victory here. You see, David, listen, catch this. David didn't defeat Goliath for God. God defeated Goliath for David. I want that to sink in. What if we flip the script and we stop saying what I'm going to do for God? I'm going to go defeat Goliath for God. And what if we realize that God wants to defeat some Goliaths for us? Wow. There's so many things taunting us and taunting God's church. But we need to realize who's fighting this battle. We need to realize it's God who fights. It's God who does this. It's God who wins. That's the significance here. What's taunting you? Hopelessness and maybe identity issues. Maybe you feel stuck in your marriage, and I want to let you know that your spouse is not your enemy. The enemy wants to tell you that your marriage is over, and I want to tell you that it's not over. Maybe you're feeling so alone, and God is saying, listen, you're not alone. You weren't meant to be alone. We're going to have victory together here. We're going to need to realize that the battle is not ours, but it's God's. That's what we learn here. I don't know what you're facing, but you can get free from it. Now, David took Goliath's head. Now, it was very typical. What would happen here is to place the head on a spear and overlook Jerusalem, God's city, at a place called Golgotha, the place of the skull. It could have been, and many writers say that most likely this happened. They took Goliath's head up on a hillside overlooking God's city, Jerusalem, as a symbol that God brings victory, even through a little shepherd boy, the cheese boy, just going to deliver cheese. That's all he was doing. But look what he did. I think it represents something so much bigger. I think it represents this. I think it represents also what happened on Golgotha 1,000 years later when Jesus died at Golgotha, the place of the skull. One victory in the Old Testament, hey, one small victory pointed to a greater victory. What Jesus did for you and what he did for me. That victory provides life. It provides a way that we don't have to walk terrified and fearful anymore. We can walk in freedom. We can walk in confidence. And we don't have to be afraid of the giants taunting our life. We can step out with courageous faith. I don't want us to be like that Florence Chadwick that I spoke of earlier, who was so close to finishing, but we didn't finish. And many of us in our lives, we get so close, but yet we never finish. We never see the completion. And if you're a follower of Jesus Christ, I'm here today to tell you, I'm speaking right to you right now. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give in. Hold on. Hold tight to what God's doing. And if you're not a follower of Jesus Christ, I want to offer you a relationship with Jesus Christ. Because of what happened at that place of the skull, Jesus Christ gave his life. And he gave his life for you, and he gave his life for me. And my life significantly changed. And I became a giant slayer when I said, Jesus Christ, be the forgiver of my past and the leader to my future. When that happened, all things changed. And that's what I want for you. You too can be a giant slayer, not living in fear to all these things. That's what we learn with David and Goliath, and that's you right now. So if that's you, I want to offer you today to be your day. Change your whole life. Don't hesitate. Don't wait. Let it be today, where you just say a simple prayer. Father God, forgive me. I have sinned. I have fallen short. And I ask you, Jesus, to be the leader of my life. Lead me into my future. That's where it all starts right there. And now, together, we're going to learn how to identify the problems, engage the problems, and be victorious and overcome our problems by the power of God. Hey, I sure hope this has been helpful to you today. If it's been helpful, make sure that you tell your friends to tune in. Make sure you tell everybody you know to tune in and stay a part of what God's doing. Next week, we're going to be diving in to Jesus feeding the 5,000. What a great miracle that was found in all of the Gospels. We're going to be diving into that. You don't want to miss it. I'm looking forward to that time with you. Have a great and an awesome day week. In Jesus' name.